Hey there, and welcome to a deep dive tailored just for you into the fascinating world of learning. Ever feel like some learning materials just click and others leave you utterly lost?
Totally.
Well, we're about to unpack that mystery as we explore the power of multiple representations in learning.
Yeah, it's wild how presenting information in different ways can totally change the game.
It really is. Our guide on this journey is a 2006 study from the well-respected academic journal Learning and Instruction.
It's amazing how relevant this research still is all these years later, and learning and instruction, it's known for its rigorous standards, so we're dealing with some really high-quality insights here.
Yeah, this isn't just some random blog post. These researchers were the real deal. They dug deep into why using things like diagrams, graphs, formulas, even animations can make such a difference in how we learn. And their findings boil down to three main benefits. What's the first one?
Well, the first benefit is that each type of representation, kind of like different tools in your toolbox,
Okay.
each one reveals unique aspects of the concept you're trying to learn.
Makes sense.
Like a diagram might be perfect for showing how things relate to each other,
Right.
while a graph is all about showing trends over time.
Okay.
And a formula gives you that precise mathematical meaning.
I see.
Each one offers a fresh perspective.
I like it. Our brains do love a good variety pack, right?
Yeah.
But what really got me was the second benefit: these representations can work together almost like a tag team to make learning smoother.
Absolutely. It's true. Imagine trying to understand the concept of speed and acceleration.
Okay.
Now, picture this, an animation of a car going uphill, and right next to it, you've got a speed time graph.
Okay. I'm with you.
As that car slows down, you see the line on the graph flatten out.
Right.
Suddenly, that graph isn't just a bunch of lines.
Yeah.
It becomes a dynamic picture of what's happening.
That's like makes it real. Yet seeing those two things connected would make me way more interested in what that graph is trying to tell me. Okay, so we've got different perspectives and we've got teamwork.
What's the third benefit?
This is where it gets really interesting, I think. The research found that translating information from one representation to another, like, say, going from a graph to a formula,
Yeah.
that actually strengthens our mental models.
So it's like our brains are doing cross-training,
Yeah,
getting a workout by switching between these different formats.
exactly. Our brains have to make connections, right? Bridge the gaps between those different perspectives.
All right.
And that deeper processing, that's what leads to more solid understanding.
It's not just seeing the same information in a different font. It's about challenging our brains to actually make those connections. That active learning process is where the magic really happens. But let's be real, if it were that easy, we'd all be talking encyclopedias by now, right?
Right.
There's got to be a catch.
There's always a catch.
So what is it? What makes this multiple representation thing so tricky sometimes? Well, the researchers identified 4 main hurdles that learners often face, even when using these multiple representations with all their benefits.
Okay, hit me with it.
The first hurdle is something called syntax, basically. Each representation has its own unique language.
Like learning a new code.
Exactly. Take a graph, for instance. You need to understand what the axes mean, the labels, the different types of lines or bars.
It's like trying to read a book in a foreign language.
Yeah,
Gotta learn the alphabet first.
precisely. And once you've kind of cracked the code of the language, the next challenge is mapping. And this involves actually connecting those elements of the representation to the concept you're trying to learn.
Okay, so going back to our car and graph example, if I see a really steep line on the graph,
Yeah.
I need to know if that means the car's going super fast,
Mhm.
or if it's accelerating really quickly, or something else altogether.
Exactly. And it seems pretty straightforward, but these connections aren't always so obvious, especially for someone who's new to the topic.
Right.
And it gets even trickier when we start bringing in multiple representations at the same time.
Which brings us to challenge number 3.
You got it, relating. This is where we need to see how all these different representations of the same concept actually connect to each other.
And that's not always clear, is it?
Not always. It's like trying to put together a puzzle, but all the pieces are from different boxes.
Oh, I hate when that happens.
Right.
Yeah.
You know they're related somehow, but figuring out how they all fit together, that's the real challenge.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
So then what's the fourth challenge?
The fourth one is the most challenging one of all, and it's called translation. It's not just about understanding how each representation works by itself, but being able to switch between them.
Okay.
Taking information from one and converting it into another, and understanding the subtle differences between them.
So it's not enough to know that a steep line on a graph means high speed. I also need to be able to take that and maybe sketch out how the car's moving, or You even calculate the distance it's traveled, right?
Exactly. That's where the real brain work comes in. And it's where a lot of learners stumble if they don't have the right support.
So what can we do about that?
Well, the good news is the researchers didn't just leave us hanging with a bunch of problems and no solutions.
Okay, good, because I was starting to get a little stressed.
They actually tested ways to make these multiple representations work for us, not against us.
Okay, because sometimes I feel like I need a GPS just to navigate a simple graph.
Right.
So what did they find? What can help us overcome these hurdles and really unlock the power of these multiple representations?
Well, they found that if you want someone to really understand something deeply, just throwing a bunch of different representations at them isn't enough.
Interesting.
You need to build in support, something to bridge those gaps.
Like a scaffolding to hold everything together while the learning is happening.
That's a great way to put it. They tested two main types of support, both aimed at making those connections between representations crystal clear. The first one is called integrating representations.
Okay, I like the sound of that already. What is it?
So instead of having, say, a diagram over here, a graph over there, and some text off to the side, it's more about weaving them all together.
Oh, I see.
Imagine, for example, a physics diagram where the equations aren't just floating off by themselves, but they're embedded right there in the diagram,
Oh, that's cool.
showing the forces at work right where they happen.
I like it.
Or think about a historical timeline where each event is linked to maps and images from that time period. You create this unified experience where the connections are impossible to miss.
It's like that aha moment when you're trying to put together furniture from those notoriously bad diagrams.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you see how all the pieces fit together.
Exactly. And the second support method, called dynamic linking, takes this idea of connection to a whole new level.
Okay, now you're just teasing me. Dynamic linking. Tell me more.
This is where things get really cool. Picture this. You have multiple representations of the same system, maybe a graph, a table of numbers, and even an animation.
Yep.
With dynamic linking, when you change something in one of them, say you increase the force in an experiment,
Yeah.
all the other representations instantly update to reflect that change.
Wait, hold on. So I'm picturing myself dragging a slider on a graph. And as I do that, the numbers in the table change, and the animation plays it all out in real time.
That's it. That's dynamic linking.
It's amazing.
It makes those abstract relationships concrete. Learners can experiment and see those ripple effects across all the representations at once. It's incredibly powerful.
Okay, I'm sold. That does sound really cool. But did it actually work? Did students who learned with these integrated and dynamically linked representations actually do better?
That is the million-dollar question. And to answer it, the researchers designed a really interesting experiment.
Okay, tell me more.
They built a whole simulation based around a physics concept called moments, which deals with forces and levers and balance, like a seesaw.
Moments.
Yeah.
That sounds like it's straight out of a physics textbook.
It can be a bit tricky, but the researchers did something really clever. They kept the content the same for all the participants.
Okay.
The only thing they changed was how that information was presented.
So it's a controlled experiment to really pinpoint the impact of those different presentation styles.
Exactly. They divided the students into 3 groups.
Okay.
The first group, our control group, got the classic treatment separate representations that weren't linked in any way.
Like standard textbook diagrams, equations off to the side, maybe a few static pictures, the usual.
Exactly. Then the second group, they got to play with those dynamically linked representations we were just talking about.
Oh, fun.
Still separate visuals and data, but with that cool instant update feature, change one thing and boom, everything else changes along with it.
I bet that was engaging.
Oh, yeah. And the third group, they got the deluxe package, integrated and dynamically linked representations.
The best of both worlds.
Exactly. All of those visuals and data points, all interwoven like a perfectly synchronized dance, all responding in real time to any changes.
Okay, I've got to know. Did those fancy representations actually make a difference in how well these students understood these moments?
Well, the results were pretty interesting. First of all, everyone learned something. Scores went up across all 3 groups, which tells us the simulation itself was a pretty effective teaching tool, no matter how the information was presented.
That's good to know. So no matter how you slice it, the simulation itself had value.
Yeah.
But I'm really curious about the differences between those groups. What happened when you compare them?
That's where it gets really interesting. It turns out that dynamic linking on its own, that cool instant update feature,
Yeah.
it wasn't actually enough to make a big difference. The group with those dynamically linked but still separate representations, they didn't really outperform the control group who had the static materials.
So just Having things move and groove on the screen isn't enough. It seems like how those things are connected really matters.
That's what they found. The clear winner was integration. The group who learned with those combined, dynamically linked representations, they knocked it out of the park, especially when it came to those more complex parts of this moments concept.
Interesting. So it's like having a really good tour guide when you're in a new city. They don't just show you the sights. They weave together all the history and the architecture and the culture, so you really experience it on a deeper level.
That's a great analogy, and it highlights something really crucial about learning. When we're dealing with complex information, our brains crave those connections, those aha moments when all the pieces suddenly click into place.
It all makes sense.
Right. And multiple representations, especially when they're integrated and dynamically linked like this, they can be incredibly powerful tools for creating those light bulb moments.
It makes you wonder, why aren't we using these integrated and dynamic representations more often?
Well, it's not always easy or practical, especially with traditional teaching materials like textbooks. A textbook can only do so much. But as technology keeps advancing, we're seeing more and more opportunities to create these richer, more interactive learning experiences.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Think simulations, virtual reality, even augmented reality. It's an exciting time to be interested in learning.
It really is. But all this talk about effective learning makes me think about something else. Even if students grasp a concept really well in a simulation or a lesson, can they actually use that knowledge in new situations, out in the real world?
You're hitting on something really important, and it's definitely an area where we need more research.
Okay.
This study, as insightful as it is, didn't actually find strong evidence of what we call transfer, that ability to take what we've learned and apply it to something new.
So even if those students ace the test on moments, we don't know for sure if they could then go out and, say, design a better seesaw or understand how gears work in a machine.
Exactly.
And that's the ultimate goal of learning, isn't it? To be able to use what we know in the real world to solve problems, to come up with new ideas.
Absolutely.
So, as fascinating as this deep dive has been so far, I've got to ask.
Yeah.
What does this all mean for our listener, the person who's tuned in and is learning all about multiple representations? What's the takeaway?
It means that they're getting a glimpse into how we really learn best. It's not just about physics and moments. It's about seeing the power of finding those different representations, especially the ones that are well put together.
So next time I'm trying to wrap my head around a new concept, I shouldn't just keep rereading the same paragraph over and over again, hoping it'll magically make sense.
Exactly. Don't get stuck in just one way of looking at it.
Right.
Ask yourself, what am I missing here?
Yeah.
Is there another way to look at this, a different representation that might unlock it for me?
I like that.
Maybe that means sketching out a diagram or looking for a helpful video online, or even just trying to explain the concept to a friend.
Yeah, there's something about trying to teach something that really makes you get it straight in your own mind.
Absolutely. Teaching is honestly one of the best ways to learn.
That's true.
And it shows just how important it is to really engage with the information, not just passively take it in.
Right, be active.
And the exciting thing is, this research is from 2006. Think about all the potential of today's technology to create even more immersive learning experiences,
Oh, for sure. Yeah, we've got VR, we've got AR, simulations that respond in real time.
Yeah.
It feels like the possibilities are endless these days.
They really are. We're moving towards a future where learning can be more personalized, more engaging, and ultimately more effective.
This deep dive has given our listener a lot to think about. So what's the final thought we want to leave them with?
The key takeaway from this research, and this is important, is that integrated representations are where it's at. When it comes to truly understanding complex concepts, integration is key. It's not just about having different ways of representing information. It's about having those representations work together seamlessly and intuitively. That's what sparks those aha moments and leads to deep, lasting learning.
So to our listener, remember this. The next time you're facing a learning challenge, get creative. Seek out those integrated representations, those interconnected pathways of knowledge, and watch your understanding soar. If something feels like a jumbled mess, maybe you just need to find the right representation to make it all click into place.
And who knows, you might even discover a new passion for teaching what you've learned along the way.
Now that's a thought. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of multiple representations and their incredible potential to transform how we learn. We'll catch you next time for another fascinating exploration.